Welcome. In this lesson, we're going to talk about the limitations of ChatGPT or just any AI assistant model in general. These are really good 5 common things that are limitations across all sorts of different AI models. Let's start with the first one, lack of human intelligence. Contextual understanding. Although ChatGPT is very advanced, it cannot replace human reasoning. It can generate contextualized answers, but it fails to understand the deeper meaning of the text, and it leads to a very generic or incorrect responses. So we always have to watch your question, whatever it comes out, be skeptical of it because there's no reasoning, there's no memory behind of it. It's just trying to predict statistically what's the next likely word when they're paired together. You do need a human to verify the outputs of all responses. AI is not going to replace humans, but you still need humans or experts in the workflow for the task that you're working on, and those experts do need to verify the data that's coming out. It really makes beginners or novices, people that are just new to their career, give them false impression of confidence that they can write code and they can write a legal draft or they can diagnose a medical problem. So it gives a false sense of confidence. But if you're an expert who's been trained, spending decades in that craft or doing that task for many, many years, you know the outputs that are response are pretty mediocre. So the best way to think of it is like these AI assistants or models are really good at personal assistance to help you accomplish a task that you're working on faster and to save you time, but to not rely on them for truth or for honesty or for real deeper understanding or to see a different perspective. That's something that is very limited to it. So there's no human. These are large language models. They're just a large set of training data that tries to predict the next word, just like when you go to Google and you type in the sky is, and it says, oh, sky is blue. Most likely, that's the phrase that always comes after it. So there's no deeper understanding or reasoning behind any of these models. You do need a human to verify the outputs. These models are biased and they also could have responses that have some discriminatory responses, basically. So a lot of the models are very neutered and very safe for work. Kind of like I like using lobotomized or neutered as the phrase. Because they're all owned by private organizations or private companies that don't want to get sued. They're also trained by, or a lot of their inputs were verified by humans that do have, say, political biases and stuff like that. And all of that was baked into the training set of data. So not the models are not like the be all end all source of truth kind of thing. They all have, they're very censored as far as the outputs that they output. They're not going to give you any like oppositional political view, or they're not going to give you not safe for work type of content. These are very neutered models because they're privately owned and they're public for lots of people to use out of. So you do have to really notice about the training data limitations. Each of these models, especially ChatGPT or Claude, for example, what they do is they take a large amount of information on the internet and it has some cutoff date, April 2023 or some arbitrary date, and then they train the model. It's almost like compressing that file size, and then they release that model from there. So every model or version of any of these AI models, like ChatGPT 3.5, 4.0, all of these models, when they always get updated. Some period of months, they'll get updated with new training data, which gets new updated information of it. But they do have a limited set of information that they're trained on. They like to advertise that they're like trained on all information on the internet. There's a big asterisk around that kind of thing, and they're actually like running out of data too, and it's very hard to get high quality information and data to put into these models for them to be really good at a specific output, for example. So know that there's some cutoff for the training data that's used to create any of these base models, for example. If you've used ChatGPT and you try to give it a very big task like write an essay, write an academic paper, write a blog post, you get a very repetitive Wikipedia style output, for example. ChatGPT is going to repeat text because that's what it's trained on. It's just trained on a library text. There's no reasoning, there's no unique perspective behind it. The models, you're not going to go to these models and whatever they output, think that you're going to write a book or write an academic paper and be done with whatever the models output. That's not the best use of the models. They're really, again, I'm always going to say, personal assistants at a college intern level that you can give a task and research or information that you've sourced your own outside of AI, and giving that to the model to complete a task. They're really good at productivity, time saving at the end of the day, to save you time from having to do that manual labor. For example, it's just productivity, which is really what they're meant for. You really have to feed the model outside information that you've done your own research, PDF, your own articles, your own books, your own other research from outside of Google searching, for example. Take that information and then give it to the model to have a completed task. That's what it's really, you'll get a much better, higher quality output than just relying on whatever the model generates as text. You're going to get something, again, very repetitive, very verbose, very generic, and very non-human kind of thing. It doesn't use language that we speak in day to day, for example. This is a big one, plagiarism issues. There is no unique data in the training data, for example. ChatGPT cannot generate any unique data. Its responses are variations of existing information from multiple sources on the internet. If you take anything from as the output from ChatGPT and just ship as the final product, such copy paste and put in an academic paper, put in a news article, put in a blog post, put in an email, you run the very high, for sure it will be flagged as plagiarism if they take that text that you outputted and they put it. There's AI plagiarism tools, especially in colleges and schools and stuff like that. They check all the paper with some AI plagiarism checker tool that just says, was this generated using AI? And it's very easy to spot because it uses words that people don't use in their day-to-day language. It uses especially in academic papers, people get flagged. So especially if you're using it for commercial or academic purposes, know that any output that comes out of Claude or ChatGPT is not unique, and it will get flagged for plagiarism and copyright. You can't just have whatever ChatGPT outputs and use that as a book chapter and then try and expect to sell that on Amazon. That's not how these models work, for example. So you still have to put your own creative input, your own reasoning, your own unique spin on it. You really have to still put these in a text editor and work with them to modify them, to put a human touch on them, to really ship it in an academic or commercial purpose, for example. You still have to be the expert that relies on it to do the final tweaking for whatever it outputs to ship it in your final project, for example. Now, ChatGPT is the number one, or these AI models are probably the most popular apps that majority, I'm talking millions of people, are using on a day-to-day basis, especially at 11 to 1 o'clock at work. Guaranteed these systems, wherever the apps are hosted, are under heavy load where they're getting millions upon hundreds of millions. That's probably, I'm just making that up. There's probably hundreds of millions of requests every couple minutes. Like, it is an insane amount of volume of internet traffic that these apps that are accessed through your phone or your web browser are trying to process and send information back and forth. So know that there's two things. One, they do get overloaded when there's too many users on the system. If you're in the free plan especially, you'll get prioritized lower than people that are on the paid plan. The paid plan really gets you more access to the models in more of a reliable access time, so that you don't have to, either the system will crash, for example, or it kind of like that freezes on basically on the answers or stuff like that. So you'll either get a slow response or you'll get an error message. Just know that, especially if you're on the free plan, definitely want to pay to upgrade, because then you get access to the models under heavy use time during the work week, so that you can reliably use them, because everyone in the world is using AI models. It is the most popular apps around. So let's summarize what we just learned. Number one, we cannot replace human reasoning and understanding with AI. Whatever the AI outputs, they're just text generators based on information that's already sourced on the internet. They do not generate unique text, for example. There's no reasoning behind it, and there's no in depth thought behind it, for example. You get a very high level, surface, generic Wikipedia kind of style answer that's very bland and very not very human. Training data is there's bias in it, and it's always probably outdated, most likely because of the training models do have a cutoff date. They don't get updated in real time, for example, so they're months old, for example, as far as access to newest information, and trends change, for example. So that's something to be aware of. Whatever it outputs is most likely generic. If you're looking for information that is coming from these models, it's very generic. So to get around that, again, highly recommend doing your own research on academic searches like Google Scholar, for example. Or I don't use Google because Google is still very generic. There's web searches like Yandex and Brave and you.com, even DuckDuckGo, for example, that gives you independent news articles or blog posts that are on WordPress sites from independent journalists, for example. So you do have to do the hard work of still researching unique information. Then whatever you find, feed that with a task or a prompt to the AI model saying, hey, I really like how this academic paper is written. Help me write the first paragraph for my academic paper using some of the information from this. It's going to give a much better response when you provide the AI models outside information. This is especially when you get into, that's why the whole need of creating custom GPTs. We'll go into an advanced level of what are those and how to create them. But basically the premise is uploading additional unique information in the form of PDF, files, documents, feeding that to the model. So the model has a base model information plus this PDF book of additional unique information. And then when you feed it a prompt, it gives you a much better, higher quality answer output than just relying on whatever training set of data from that model that you're using, for example. And this goes across all the AI assistants. Claude and ChatGPT are the top two. Know that it's free for most of the plan, and then they do have the paid plan, but millions of people are using these apps every day, so they are under heavy load. The system does crash, and you do get error messages from time to time. So just upgrading to the free plan will get you, or paid plan will get you around that, for example. And lastly, whatever is generated, please take the time. Don't be lazy. I'm going to call you out. Don't be lazy. Whatever it outputs, put it in a text editor, Google Docs, Notion, Evernote, I don't care where, and then do the human tweaking. Really sit with whatever it outputted and add your own spin, add your own reasoning, add your own information to kind of just upgrade it. All these tools just did is just save you time from going from a blank paper to something to work with. Great. Now that you got that done, then still continue to hone your craft. You'll notice that as the more you use them, the more they will kill your critical thinking skills, much like how TikTok kills your attention span. Like, don't depend on these apps to just feed you information, for example, and then trust whatever they output. As a good rule of thumb, I never trust anything or any information that comes out of an AI model. I am very skeptical, and I do spend a lot of time reading books and doing my own research and going across multiple different sources online, Reddit, or blog posts, or old books that are written before 2000, for example, to really hone my critical thinking skills, to continue to build my deep reasoning skills, for example, because being solely dependent on whatever you ask a question or you give a prompt, whatever these things output, and you become more dependent on them, then you will lose your critical thinking skills and your reasoning. It's just like apathy. If you don't use it, you will lose it. So I really recommend just using these tools as productivity tools, personal assistants that you could college level intern, you could give some work and accomplish some task a little bit faster, little micro tasks, for example. So that's a summary of the limitations of AI models or ChatGPT, for example, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Thank you.